There we go. So we're continuing our exploration of the Heart Sutra, and a couple of thoughts strike me at the very beginning. And one of the things I said that, as we were going through our opening question today of something that you've had a strong reaction to where the reaction has changed. And we had lots of great examples. Books that we started to read that we hated, that we grew to like, movies that we started to look at that we thought, oh my God, how could anybody watch this, that you grew to love or think were very funny. Different foods that we've had different reactions to, like ice cream, you loved it and now you hated it, or ketchup, you hated it and now you love it, or beets. That was another one, hating them and then growing to like them. Uh, Thinking that you didn't have anything to do with religion, and yet now here you find yourself, right, interested in at least exploring this, or being fearful of what would happen when you walked your dog, who was sort of nervous around other dogs, and then growing to love the experience, etc. So many examples of something that you had a strong feeling about, where the feeling changed. So that ties into um, this is called the Sutra of the Heart of Transcendent Knowledge, or sometimes shorthanded as the Heart Sutra. And it is about the sort of experience and recognition of wisdom, or transcendent knowledge, which is called prajna. And the word in prajna, or that syllable, is related to sharp or incisive, or we might say insightful. And jna is related to the word for knowledge in Sanskrit. So it's insightful knowing. And what it cuts through, the sharpness of it, it cuts through confused appearance so that you can recognize the way things are. And this is where we started our discussion so many weeks ago. The way things are is that they're very vivid. Life shows up and it's compelling and it feels like it's happening to you. And you can see through what appears to be so solid and so compelling to the radical, wide open, empty full that everything's taking place in. So it's vivid and wide open, empty full at the same time. Or you might say it's vivid and empty. That's what prajna sees. So here we are in the story of the Heart Sutra, and the Buddha is at this mountain called Vulture Peak, or Rajagriha, and he's surrounded by his students and followers, and he inspires this discussion between the two characters, Avalokiteshvara and Shariputra. And Shariputra says, how do you practice this sharp knowing? And it says about Shariputra that he had seen through the five skandhas. So he had seen through the vividness of the five skandhas. And this is a little bit of background information that you need to understand both the Heart Sutra and what's going to be presented today. So in the foundation teachings, there's lots of ways to talk about how ego gets going, how it builds itself up, how the flow, we talk about more like a river than a rock, how the flow transforms itself into a rock. And one way is that we take our experience, because when we say ego, ego's not out there. Ego is what we're doing, right? So ego is actually about me, or if we were talking about you, it would be what you're doing, right? So we take the flow of experience, and first we experience it as separateness. So they call that form. And then we have a reaction to that separate thing, and we call that feeling. And then, we give it a name, and, we hang a lot of, solidity. The rock is getting more and more solid, right? We name it, and then we have a strategy about it, and then we have our story that we're telling ourselves about how we are with that thing that we love, we hate, or we couldn't care less. So, in the Buddhist description of the engine of ego, there are three major fuels that make ego run. One is aversion. I don't like that. I hate it. I don't want it. Right? Get away from me. The other is Passion, I love it. I like that. That's interesting. Give me more. And then couldn't care less. I don't even want to know about it. In fact, I don't even see it. It's also called ignorance. So passion, aggression, and ignorance. We have a feeling reaction. Sometimes those core feelings are listed as 5 or 7, but let's keep it simple with the 3 list. Like it, hate it, couldn't care less. So we have a strong reaction. We have a feeling, and that's what they mean by feeling. And so if you think about the example that you gave at the beginning of this, and, or if you're listening to it, think about an example of something that you had a strong reaction to. And the invitation was something that wasn't, world shattering or, major trauma. It's just a little thing like, here's a book that I started that I hated, that I grew to love, or a movie that I was sitting through that I was like, how can people watch this to like, oh, that's interesting, or I like this, or food, right? You used to love it, and now when you eat it, it doesn't feel good. So now you don't like it, right? Or the other way, right? So you have a strong reactive feeling. What the Heart Sutra says about these 5 moments of form, feeling, perception, formation, and consciousness: separate, naming, strategy, story. Right? So I'm just giving them different names, but the same basic idea. And we're at the reaction part today, is that the reaction itself is not solid. And you all demonstrated that in the answer to the question. My answer of ketchup. I had a fear of ketchup. I know it seems stupid, silly. It was something that one of my older brothers teased me with as a kid, telling me that it was actually blood. I believed him because I was really little. And then I grew up with this, yuck, how can you put that on food? Until one day by accident, somebody did and I didn't notice. And it was, that's good. And so the reaction changed. But if you had asked me between that moment when my older brother played that trick on me and when somebody else didn't tell me what was in what I was eating, I would have had a very solid story that I hated that. Now I like it. I think I hated it from the time I was about 4 until I was 19. And then that's 50 years ago. So 19 to 59. I'm glad I've had 50 years of liking it as opposed to 15 years of not liking it. But that doesn't really matter. What matters is the changeability of it. Now, here's where it gets very personal. You probably have lots of feelings. Sometimes we call them emotions. That's not exactly what I'm talking about. That's more further down the line. This is just sort of the reactivity that's underneath of your emotions. That sort of like, dislike, don't care, right? We go through our lives like that. And the Heart Sutra is saying, first, you could notice that that's happening. It gives you a lot of information if you're paying attention to, oh, here's my reaction to that thing. And then um, you could see that that changes. That, we had a powerful answer to the question of a childhood reaction with a parent saying one thing that was very hurtful, and then years later going, that actually wasn't good. That's not real. That's not the way it is. It could have been so much better. Right? And then at that moment of, oh, that's not solid, then the reaction can change. I had this happen to me once in a long retreat. I was where I was on retreat. We would wake up pretty early in the morning, and I was tired after the previous day's many hours meditating, and we'd wake up at 5 a.m. or 4:30 a.m. And this retreat looked over the water of the Gulf of St. Lawrence, and at 4:30 in the morning, at this time of year, you'd look out and you'd see there are the fishermen. They're already out there in their lobster boats, getting ready to do their fishing for the day. And it's like, oh, if the fishers are out there, they left where the harbor is, because I knew where the harbor was, at least at 4 or 3:30. And so I was upset about getting up at 4:45 to practice at 5, and they had been at their boat maybe at 3 o'clock in the morning so that I could see them outside the window. I was like, if they can do that, well, maybe my reaction of, oh, this is so hard, I don't like getting up early, maybe that doesn't have to be so solid. And then I began to investigate that. And so, where this takes you across from being stuck as a rock back into the flow of experience is you can look at where you are reactive. And so, the invitation, the contemplative invitation would be to look for your strong reactions, to first listen to them, take them in. They probably have an intelligence and a wisdom that they're communicating to you. If I go back to my ketchup example, I don't want to eat something that's not good. That's smart, right? And then look again, look deeper. So look and see the wisdom, and then look and see where it could change. Is it true? Is it still important? Can you let it go? And the more you look, the more you go from rock to being open to the flow of the river going by. And that's part of what takes you across the river, Prajnaparamita, to the other side of awakening. And so with that, I'm going to pause, and I'd love to know what you think.